Southwestern Family of Companies welcomes you to the Action Catalyst. Each week, our diversely and amazingly accomplished guests share their insights and inspirations to help us ignite our own. So let's invest attention together to breathe, to reflect and refocus, and decisively defeat that voice we call Mr. Mediocrity. Then let's enjoy moving forward to make a positive difference in our world.
This episode is sponsored by Southwestern Coaching. Southwestern Coaching has helped over 12,000 people increase their incomes by over 25% on average. As a successful salesperson, you know the importance of increasing your sales, but sometimes you might just need a little extra push and accountability to meet your goals and grow your business. Southwestern Coaching will help you increase your income through one-on-one sales and leadership coaching tailored specifically to your needs. Together, we will elevate sales.
Welcome to the Action Catalyst. In this episode, Ron interviews former Southwestern Consulting coaching client Josh Hudson, the owner and CEO of Hudson's Furniture, and hope you enjoy.
Hello, Josh. Listeners, I've got my good friend Josh Hudson joining today. This is Ron Alford live with you for an edition of Action Catalyst. And this is something I've been looking forward to greatly for quite a while, Josh, just getting to spend this time with you. And after a lot of years of us spending time in a very intimate setting. So I was hoping if you could, just to kind of kick us off, just walk the listeners through your story, man. Your background fascinated me. Just your desire in the fitness arena. Obviously, you were about to have your fourth child, your marriage, your family story of Hudson's Furniture and kind of how that came about, and then your role. If you don't mind, just give us a little bit of the path that you have to your role now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here today and to get a chance to share my story and talk with your audience a little bit. But yeah, my story, is I'm second generation family business. And so I'm sure a lot of your listeners that are out there that have dealt with family businesses, they have a lot of complications and they have a lot of challenges. They have a lot of awesome opportunity as well. But, I joined the family business in a time where there was a lot of trouble. There was a lot of financial difficulty. There was a lot of strain that came with that. And all I knew was hard work. And I worked really, really, really hard for a long time. And then I thought, well, there's got to be a way that I can work a little bit smarter to navigate all these challenges. And even though things were going good, that's kind of what led me to the path of kind of exploring a coach, like a business coach. And I've always been an athlete and I've always learned a lot from my coaches. And I thought, well, this is kind of silly, not having one for business. And so that led me to the path of exploring a relationship with Southwestern Consulting and with you, Ron. And it was a lot of fun, but yeah, there was a lot of challenges. I was a very young guy trying to take over. I had a lot of older leadership and I have a twin brother and, we had all sorts of, closeness and challenges there. So, yeah, I had a huge long list of challenges. But again, business was headed in a great direction. I just knew that we could do better. I knew that I could do better on so many levels for myself, for my people, and so forth. And that's kind of my story and where I am now, still in the same position.
Mm. Yeah. So maybe to get into specifics too, because I think for a lot of our listeners, whatever industry they're in, obviously is somewhat irrelevant. But for any of us that are in sales, in business, in leadership, recruiting, obviously influencing, right? And that role, I remember on our first call, just thinking, man, you didn't have a lot of challenge. Like you really were grooving, like your business was trending upwards. Family was great. Health was great. You just had a lot going for you. But I think what the story behind the story was there's always something deeper there. And so your story, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the business started kind of Great Depression era and then formally in 1981, right? And your dad was running it when we started. And then you and your brother were kind of taking over. And so to get into the dynamics of that, president then, CEO now, walk us through, man, if you could, just a couple specific challenges that you guys were facing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a twin and I know you have twins, so you're probably getting to witness that. I have a twin brother and he's a super talented guy. And we're 50-50 business partners, and there were so many dynamics there because he has a lot of talent. He's also very different than me. We both are open as, hey, you're two very different people, and then you have to make it work. And then we have the dynamic of, our dad and him trying to let go and him having to pass it on. And then, the generational differences and leadership styles and running a business style. And we had some other silent family members involved, and the dynamics of that, things were going good, but I just knew that under the surface, there were some things that were teeming that were difficult to really look out at the horizon and be like, okay, well, this is going to work great 20 years from now or 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now. The trend line was good, but there was sort of, always a tug in my gut about how is this going to work long term? Am I on a sustainable path? I think, my natural nature was just to run with the ball as hard as I could. And even if you're doing that and you're having some successes, you're going to cause a lot of commotion. You're going to cause distance with yourself and other people, and especially the other people that are the leaders in the business with you, if they're not on the same pace as you are. And so I had dynamics like that going on like crazy, where there were distances dividing between me and key family members, and trying to figure out, okay, how are we all going to stay together and accomplish this long term? And, I think I also really struggled to look really long term and say, okay, well, what are my big end goals? And that was a lot of what, you and I worked together with, is you would ask me the really deep, the really hard questions that would produce answers that would change behaviors for me in the short term. They made me better as a leader. They would, things like you'd say, hey, well, Josh, if one of your goals out of this family business is to have a tight family relationship with everyone that you're in business with, what are you doing today to ensure that could happen? And, if I said nothing, then that was something that had to get fixed. And so, I think that was a big part of, to answer your question, of what was going on at the present time that we knew we needed to work on.
Yeah. Well, you're specifically highlighted in our book, Redefining Possible, in the chapter on faith. And I think even just listening to what you just said, like in your role where on paper, the income's great, the title's great, the influence is great, you have a lot of people that report to you, they're still like, I'm just fascinated by, you still had that level of uncertainty. Like, what's this going to look like in 5 years? What's this going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years for my family and for the business? And then it comes back to that powerful word, right? Faith is such a grand term, but on a day-to-day level, you having faith that things were going to work out. Walk through, if you don't mind, just when you think of the day-to-day back then, because we talked about how you delegate, right? You had so much on your plate, how you kind of emotionally let go of some of the things you can't control, right? The reality is you kind of got what you got in certain ways. And so it's like, how do I accept some of those areas? And then how do I really focus on the things I can control? What are things you do? Because I think a lot of our listeners, and I know myself, I struggle with the faith thing weekly. Like, how do I keep that faith stoked? How do I keep that confidence alive, even in a world of uncertainty? You can even speak to that on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about where I was back then, it's really interesting, right? Because I'm, my oldest is just turned 12 now. And so I was just into the kid world. And, as you transition from a single guy to having a family, I mean, I could go a million miles an hour. I could work a lot. I knew I was kind of on an unsustainable path, though. And that's where me and you were kind of talking. I said, I can't do this forever. I can't have a family and operate like this. I can't. And this isn't even what I want, regardless of that. I don't want to do this forever. And I knew I was unable to sustain it long term. I mean, I'm thinking too, when we started working together, I didn't have an assistant, and you were the one that started opening the doors for me to explore using an assistant. And all these things, they came with incredible challenges. I mean, even using an assistant, learning how to delegate, learning how to spend times on the things that matter long term but not short term. Those were the things that that was the hard work, if I'm remembering right, because it wasn't, the immediate payoff of getting a job done type of work that I was used to. But when I made the connection, with you and we were talking about it, I had faith that something was wrong. I had faith that I needed to explore new ways of doing things. I had faith that I needed to think about sustainable long-term systems and growth. And I needed to work on, relationship building. I needed to work on my communication skills, my delegation skills. And so, there was a lot of places in there where there's a lot of fear, right? Because I was scared about having kids. I was scared about, sustaining the path I was on. Scared about how I would be perceived if there was a downturn. Like I knew I was a hero while sales were up, but what would that obviously isn't possible, unless, I guess it is possible for some companies, but I knew that I needed to build myself, my leadership in my company in a way that we were kind of unshakable. It felt more like a deck of cards when we started working together, and now it feels really sustainable. And I think it took a lot of faith to see through those problems at that time and say, you know what, this will work out long term, and this is the right answer, and this feels right, not now, but it feels right in the future. And what do we need to do together to partner with that to try to get the systems in place to make it work?
Mm. Yeah, well said. I listened to you too, and I think I'm sitting here trying to think of a lot of listeners that we have that are going through this, the dynamic of, for you, and I'd love for you to speak on this, but for you being someone that has to daily overcome complacency, how do you embrace the grind and kind of embrace the monotony? You've obviously been in this family business for a long time. It's been part of your life since you were a kid, of course. And but how do you keep fresh? How do you keep driven? How do you keep that hunger alive to really grow, and while at the same time also embrace balance and realize that your family wants you to unplug and not be thinking about work at night or on the weekends. Your kids just want dad. Your wife just wants her husband, right? So how do you kind of combine those two things, keeping that drive alive, but also being able to let go of it and just relax?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one is, how do I have the drive? And for me, that one's really easy. It feels so good to get better. It feels so good to help other people. It feels so good to know, hey, you're trying to go somewhere in life with an organization. If you're winning, maybe not even financially, you're building your business, but maybe you have a mission, whatever that is, and you believe in that mission, and then you get to see that come to life. Nothing feels better, in my opinion. That it feels great to have any kind of win. It's motivating and it pushes you on. So for me, I'm always wanting to figure out a way to win. And I think God put us on earth here to live his word. And I think when we do that, we get better all the time. And we realize we don't have all the answers, and we realize we need to reach out and interact with other people that might have those answers that could help us. Whatever challenges you're facing right now, right? If you're leading a business, you're leading a company, you all have them. You have the challenges, and you're not going to get out of those challenges with the same mind you got into them with, right? You've got to do something different. You got to change your mentality a little bit. You've got to expand. You got to get better. You got to work with someone. You got to see those blind spots. You got to do that hard work. And you got to recognize that you have no chance of improving or getting out of your current situation if you're really just strictly depending on your own mind for that. So I love finding, I'm at the point now where it's motivating for me to find a blind spot. I love getting a 360 evaluation from, a new team member that's been with me 30 days and they're exposing opportunity. And we've created a culture where they're like, hey, here's an opportunity. Here's something that wasn't right with my onboarding experience. My mentality is different than it used to be. I used to feel attacked. Now I feel thankful when opportunities in this come up. And because I've just created the mentality where I know it feels so much better, to grow and to learn. And I think what also helps me balance that out is, when you work hard, with someone like Ron, you ask yourself, what are your goals, right? And if one of your goals is your family, which I'm sure for most listeners out there, it is to contribute to them and make them better, then you got to do it. And you got to understand where that is on your priority list. And yeah, if you were at work, could you be building your business a little bit? But it's not your priority, right? It's not your number one. And it helps me get that balance and perspective, because I live in a business where if I'm there more, it's going to do better, but at some point I have to have peace with cutting it off and being like, hey, I gave it everything I could. I got his, and now it's time for me to invest in my other biggest goal.
Right on. Yeah. Wow. You just touched on a couple things, man, that I think are so relevant. You talked a lot about blind spots and getting feedback. And I love what you just said. I think to me, that's a transformation of when any leader goes from kind of, we all have that ego, right? Ego can be the enemy, where it's just like we hear feedback and it's like, you feel attacked, I think were your words. And then it transformation that happens where it's like, man, thank you. That feedback is priceless. Like you're getting valuable feedback from someone that might make you make a little adjustment that could greatly impact the future. So what are other areas for you where you get feedback? Do you have a routine in terms of reading or seminars? Obviously we've talked about coaching, just other things you do to kind of sharpen yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one that you have to do and that's very hard, and you have to work at this, is you have to foster the relationships and the trust among your close team. And this applies to your family too, where they're comfortable telling you what the feedback is that's on their mind. And so, I've worked hard on that with our executive team, but I use the example of my wife for this call. She's an incredible champion of mine, just big supporter of mine, right? But I know I screw up bad with her too, and if I'm not, as the leader, intentionally working with her to create an environment where I can get some constructive feedback, I won't get any. And so I think that's a big thing with trying to find blind spots is you might say, oh yeah, I'm open, but are you really? I mean, what kind of digging have you really done to show your team that you're vulnerable and you're willing to accept that feedback? And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. Like you mentioned, the ego piece of it. I mean, you listen to this podcast, you have an ego. The ego is what helps you get to where you are. You can't ignore that it's there. But what are you doing to manage it, right? Actively, and to let people know that you want to create a team where you guys are open to it. And the benefit is when you go first in this, you set that culture, and now you'll see other team members rising up and, asking them the same questions, asking people underneath them the same things. And so it really has been transformational, and it's been a process for me too. It's been a long process. It's still going on, and you have to commit to it and stay with it for a long time. I mean, I think I've even been through phases where you just tried it real quick, and then people were like, I'm not sure I'm ready yet, and then 2 years later, it works. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things with getting that feedback, seeing blind spots, being able to improve, is creating a culture where people trust you and they know that's what you're committed to and you're willing to do it.
Yeah. Way to stand for that, man. You, I think, are an example of just layers of accountability, layers of feedback too. I think sometimes, I know I've made the mistake in the past of having one area where I might be getting some accountability or getting feedback and just thinking, I checked the box, and and I'm not as good as I could be. But so you talked about like your wife, Amy, right?
Yep.
Obviously your dad and brother, whether you wanted that feedback or not sometimes.
Yep. They were easy.
Yep. And then you even gave these, of course, a coach, for me, like being at having someone outside the bubble. And then you even gave the example of like a new employee that's giving you feedback. So that's an example. And then obviously I'm sure you had peers and friends from church or friends from college, so you've got 4 or 5 areas there going where you're getting levels or layers of feedback and accountability. That's powerful.
Yeah, everyone, what I hear on this one a lot too is everyone's perspective is unique. Okay. And you as a leader have to understand it for every person, right? In order to get yourself better as a company. So, someone that's new joining my team, they have different feedback. They have perspective. And everyone's perspective is right. It's theirs. And so I think that has opened so many doors for me. And that was what you helped me with so much, was to be open to accepting that and building myself because of that, understanding, digging in, asking why, all that. I can remember those questions very, very well.
Whether you liked them or not, right?
That's right.
Well, brother, what's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, man, that I think is so cool with your family story, just if you go on hudsonsfurniture.com, just the backstory, right, of the height of the Great Depression and some of the early roots of the company. For you guys, having gone through the Great Recession, the 2008 setbacks, right? It just feels like there's all these seasons in our life, and sometimes they're global or national. Sometimes they're more of a personal thing, where it's just a situation you might be going through with your daughter or your own health. But for all of our listeners that are in a place, there's a lot of people right now that are just in a really emotional state. What are some things you can say, man? Just if you could just speak to some of those valleys and wisdom you have and trying to get through some of that stuff.
Yeah. So, I it's hard for me not to go to my faith when I think about the hard times, right? And, I think that if the core of who you are and the goals you're going after, whether it's business or whatever, if they're grounded in your faith and they're grounded in the principles of the Bible, then you can't be wrong, right? And what you need is that trust during those hard times, whatever they are, whether they're outside influence or internal influence, that your north is headed in the right direction. Everything you're about and what you're wanting to do to push your team to, the goals you're wanting to hit, even if they're financial, how you want to get there, the root of all of that is grounded in your faith. You can't be wrong. And so you won't have the challenge of second guessing yourself, which is what I believe attacks a lot of people, is they get in really tough times. And I've been there so many times myself. And that's when you're going to see how solid everything you built, your brand, your company, what kind of rock it's built on. And if it's built on the right rock, it's going to be rock solid, and you're going to have the faith and the courage that you need to push through those goals. And, I know for me, that's what's happened many times. And I've had the internal ones, which were worse many times than the external recessions that we have been through.
Yeah, likewise. The internal, the external ones come and go, thankfully. And boy, the internal ones, there's an old saying that you're either in a valley, you're just coming out of a valley, or you're about to go into a valley. And I think sometimes the less we fight that, I know I've had a lot of valleys where I'm just like, why me? Or why am I so unique? Or what? And it's like, stop. That's not true. Like, I'm believing a lie. I'm a human. I'm on Earth, which by definition, I'm going to be going. And then when I don't fight it as much, it minimizes it, and I think it passes quicker. So I have one other question for you, man. Time with you flies, brother. I remember when we started our coaching journey. One of the things specifically that stood out, because the way I think about faith is, to me, I try to wrap my head around the fact that it's kind of like a muscle that I'm either working out and strengthening, or it's stagnant and it's becoming flat. And the things I read, the people I hang out with and associate with, I am highly influenced. I'm highly programmed, unfortunately, by the outside influences. And so if I strengthen the muscle, no matter what people's spiritual beliefs are, if I have faith, like you talked about the rock, then I'm going to be able to get through these valleys. I'm going to be able to get through these challenges different than other humans that it might take longer. When we started coaching on our first call, you said you were giving up drinking for at least a year. You talked about you hadn't had a drink in a few weeks, and you say, you know what, I just feel sharper. I feel like this is a small example of, for me to be the most present husband, the most clear, empathetic, patient dad, to be able to make crisp, clear decisions at work. Now, this isn't everybody's thing, but for you personally, that was a tough choice to say, because a lot of your world is social. You're coming in as a hero. You have well over a dozen stores, right? 17 or 18 stores throughout Florida. Yeah. And I got to imagine for you to come in and have a happy hour and have social time with everybody, and Josh, let's grab a drink. But for you to say no to that, that's an example in your life of where you were giving something up to strengthen that muscle. Anything you've done last year or two you'd speak to on that note, similar?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, being subject to, outside influences, which we all are. And, the level at which you admit it allows you to step up your game on how you want to control it. And, I still practice that to this day. Whereas if, I could probably go on forever on the subject of alcohol because, it's a challenging one, but we tend to think that alcohol is a stress reliever, and I'm not sitting here I'm not a proponent of not drinking at all, but what I'm telling you is that it is a stress adder most of the time, because when you're stressed and you're drinking, if you're under a lot of stress, you might feel like it's helping you, but it's not. You need time, you need presence, you need to think straight. And so I knew that in a lot of those critical times that when I think I might need to have a drink, it's the opposite. And so I was just trying to practice a little bit of discipline to help me get through a tough time. And I would certainly encourage anyone on that. But, on a simpler level, I would say that as of recently, there's so much outside media and influence going on right now that I can't have a huge amount of control over, right? I mean, my biggest opportunity to influence the world is the people around me. I firmly believe that every day. The ones that get to come in contact with, the ones that see me, the ones that I get to interact with. I don't believe that my public news feed is my opportunity to influence the world. So I don't focus my attention there. I focus it on the relationships I have with other people around me. I focus it on what I can control, and I try to minimize the noise that I can't. And, I know that message probably doesn't go over great with a lot of people, but when you've lived it like I have in this situation and many more, I just say you got to try it, and you'll see that there's a piece that comes with focusing on what you can control, focusing on who you do listen to, and giving the rest as little as you can.
Well, whether we want to hear it or not, and I think there's an element of know thyself too. Like, I just think, for you being at peace, we all are unique. And then at the same time, there's similarities with all of us. And so for some of our listeners, if it's not alcohol, for you to say, okay, I got to kind of unplug from news or social media a little bit, that might be kind of getting into my head. Man, that's awesome, because it obviously stresses are already there enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And those doors of what you might need to stop doing, and those being able to see that, they don't open up without a lot of hard work on yourself, and so they don't have to be, like you said, they don't have to be the social media door, they don't have to be the alcohol door, but everyone's got them. And are you aware of which ones you need to shut in order to become the best version of yourself that you could be? And that's where I'm so appreciative of our relationship, Ron. And you can't see them on your own a lot of times, and then getting exposure to that and then being able to fix it and win. It's fun. So fun.
Yeah, it couldn't be more fun, man. Thank you. I just really appreciate your heart always, man. Your team is lucky to have you, brother. And I'm your biggest fan in Seattle, from across the nation, cheering you.
I love it. We couldn't get any further apart, man, but it doesn't ever feel like it.
But no, Josh, just thanks for always, man. Always taking time. I know you got a lot on your plate, but just to give some of your personal story to our listeners, man, I think it's going to make a really big difference for people. So hope we get to cross paths in person very soon.
All right. Sounds great, Ron. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. To stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and Twitter at Catalyst_Action. Thanks for listening.